Hi everybody, and welcome to yet another Social Blueprint interview. But before we get into the interview itself, we just want to say, here at the Social Blueprint, certainly we know we're known for our videos, but we are so much more than that. We are a huge resource for the community. Go to our website, there's a calendar there, which I think is the most comprehensive calendar in the community. There's all types of organizations that have signed up with us where you can get any type of aid or a link to any type of aid that you require. Go there, I promise you, you don't even know half of the resources that the Melbourne Jewish community have to offer. And now, on to our interview for today. Friends, we all have negative emotions, and you know exactly what I'm talking about. Anger, frustration, jealousy, depression. In short, these are all disempowering states. But that's why I'm so glad today to be joined by Daniel Jenshel, because Daniel certainly is active in our community and also has potential anecdotes that we can all learn from. And with that introduction, Daniel, welcome.
Thank you, Greg. Thanks for having me.
Daniel, you are so active in the community. For people that don't know, I believe you're the former president of Caulfield Hebrew Congregation. You're on the board of, or we're on the board of Jewish Care, UJEB. The list goes on and on. I just want to hear, what is your thought process about being so active in our community?
So I think, Greg, early days I was motivated definitely by my family. They were always involved in something, not necessarily in community organisations, but more so helping people. Like from a personal point of view, we always had people around our house. And a lot of those people were down and out, I would say. They weren't necessarily the most popular people in the community. They were people that in some way needed help. So from a very early age, I was around those kind of people in the community. And I think my motivation initially was really to just give something back from the community that had given me so much from my childhood. So that was the origins of starting to get involved in community work.
Right, that's incredible. So the power of family then is certainly huge in your life?
Definitely. I mean, my family is everything to me, and I'm privileged to have an amazing family. I also often tell my kids that we're in a privileged position. Right. Essentially, I think kids growing up, especially in our community, have a false sense of security in that they think we live in Caulfield or in areas like Caulfield and we've got the comforts of a nice house, nice cars, community, travel, etc. But I often tell them we're the pointy end of that. We're the 1%. There are lots of people in our community that have a lot less and are struggling, basically.
Yeah, I think it's incredible that people don't know. I believe it's something around 20% of the Jewish community in Melbourne live below the poverty line.
Yeah, so we know through Jewish Care, through CCare, through Melbourne Jewish Community Fund, that those statistics are there, but I think a lot of the mass community are blinded to it. Not that they don't want to know, but it's very confronting. It's confronting to think that people are going through economic hardship, social hardship, domestic violence, and all those things are bottled up often within the home. And thank God the community is moving forward in leaps and bounds to provide assistance for that, but the reality is there are a lot of people struggling.
And do you think it's also just a big takeaway is you never know really what's going on in another family, if you will, is to maybe be a little bit more sensitive that what you're doing could have a negative impact on somebody?
100%. I mean, I call it the iceberg syndrome, where we often see the top of the iceberg, and when we see an iceberg, we think it's got beauty. Like we basically see the top of it, and we want to take photos of it when we see them in real life, and even when we see them on documentaries. But the reality is, there's a massive part of the iceberg that you don't see, and that can often cause damage to boats, to vessels, etc. So the same with what we see in the community. You don't see what's underneath the surface and how much damage that can cause families, individuals, and the pressure that it actually puts back on organisations. So to answer that initial question, I suppose where I want to just help is help the organisations to not so much deliver the services, because I'm myself not a professional practitioner. It's more about that wherever I can help in terms of my core competencies or my compassion, my empathy, that's where I really want to try to help in the community.
Right. And do you also take away from that a certain, and I'll lead to it more about it later, a sense of at least satisfaction that you're doing something that's positive?
I you want to be selfless about it, but
Right.
you also want to feel that those communities are appreciative of volunteers generally, which they are. And CCare is one where I've been involved, where volunteers are a key part of that organisation, and constantly I know the organisation is trying to I suppose reflect on how important they are in the community. And across our community, if you added up the economic value of volunteering, I mean, it's a massive amount, more than probably that donors give in totality. So coming back to myself, and probably you'll see that I try to always push that question away, because I don't really do it for myself. I think it makes other people feel good when you help volunteer.
Sure.
But I think I do it for a number of reasons. Firstly, I suppose I do it as a distraction to myself.
Right.
You've got family, you've got work, etc. You need another interest. Some people do sports, some people do marathon running, some people, the reality is I've got other interests. I ride a motorbike, I play golf. They're really amazing interests. But at the end of the day, I think that our time is valuable, and some of that time should be selfless in terms of giving back to ourselves. But I really feel, and I try to tell my kids, try to be involved in something, anything. And if that means starting off as an online survey and representing yourself that way, that's great. But the ultimate is actually giving up your time, because you don't get time back. So if you give time away, it's the most precious thing, especially if you can give it to another organisation.
Yes, and last I checked, you cannot buy time, unfortunately.
You cannot buy it, no.
Daniel, I mentioned earlier in the introduction about those negative emotions, and it's what I would call the Yetzer Hara. For those of you that don't know, it's more the evil inclination, if you will. And I also mentioned there's no way of getting around it. We all have it. Can you just maybe discuss that point a little bit?
Well, I think everyone has, whether it's doubts, negative thoughts, imposter syndrome, whatever it is. It starts off at an early age, socially, I think, in school and with our friends, and, we're given those positions in our friendship group. Some of them we want, some of them we don't want. But then it grows as you leave school, as you get into your job. You've got this, deep down you've got the skill, but it's a matter of actually being able to outlay that skill and actually make it into practice. So I think the negative thoughts come from a number of areas, but it's also pressure of life. As we get older, the pressure of life builds. We have family, we have relationships, we have a lot more costs in our lives. So once all those pressures start, the pressure, I think, of self-doubt or emotions of depression or feeling that you can't go forward becomes stronger. And I'm not immune from it. I mean, I would say that, throughout my life, I've definitely had periods of depression.
Right.
Now, it's not necessarily, thankfully, at the extreme of having to really deal with it, but it's definitely periods where you feel down, where you feel things aren't going your way. And I suppose bringing it back, Greg, to that question is sometimes when you do that community work and you're confronted with people that are really worse off than you, it levels you. It actually brings you back to an equilibrium of, my life is actually great.
Right.
I can go further with my own life in terms of progressing that and having a great experience, but I've also got the ability to actually help people have a better life.
Yeah, and do you feel, and we spoke about it before, what I call an unequivocal good, which is if you're going out and helping somebody, no matter how depressed you are, do you feel like it is some type of anchor in your life that at least you know that this is a positive?
I think so. I mean, even, when you need to go to a meeting or you need to go to an event or you need to volunteer to pack goods at CCare or to go to Jewish Care, it's not always that motivating force that you want to leave your home and get in the car and go. But I would say there's never been a time that I haven't left those events or functions or need to volunteer that I haven't felt better about what I'm doing. And also, hopefully, I feel like the people that I've left have felt enriched in some way. And whether that's just a conversation with someone at Jewish Care or whether that's at Emmy Monash, literally just sitting with someone who might be going through dementia, those are the kind of things I think that are rewarding. And there's a positive influence back on myself, but I think more how it helps society. Yeah,
and it's amazing how in literally an hour's time, you can walk into a place feeling awful and angry and frustrated, and someone caught you off on the way, by the way. to how much better you can feel in such a short amount of time and how much of a difference it makes.
100%. Look, there is the notion of tikkun olam and fixing the world. I have a more personal and more a holistic view, not holistic, that's quite a holistic view, more a personal individual view of that. I think it's great to be able to heal the world, but I think you have to heal people before you can heal the world. So if you actually focus on people, those people, if you can make a difference in their life and then they can pass that on, it's the whole notion in Judaism of not giving someone a handout but giving someone a job, or that notion of giving someone a fishing rod to fish rather than just giving them the fish. So if you take that emotionally, how do you actually build people's confidence back from where they are? And that's sort of over the last 5 years what I've really seen with some of the work that I've done with people in the community.
Yeah, that's incredibly well put about the giving the people the fishing rod, which also gives them a sense of purpose, and it also leads to probably a higher Jewish value, which is education, because education is the ultimate fishing rod, if you will.
It allows them to exit the position they're in, because often they don't see a way out. Often that they definitely, and once again, I'm not an expert in mental illness, but definitely people that have depression or that have issues with dealing with their circumstance feel like they're caged in some way, feel like that they just can't get out. Once again, I always like to tell my kids there's nothing can't be solved in life. It might be actually a difficult journey to get out of it, but if you have that sort of focus at the beginning and you can portray that and leverage that onto other people, that's the first step to them actually understanding, recognizing, and then allowing people to help them.
What you're just mentioning is what the person filming right now, that's my wife, always says is there always has to be a way. And I think it's the most powerful 4-letter word in the English dictionary, which is HOPE, hope.
Yeah.
People have to feel a sense that their tomorrow could be better.
And I think when the door closes in a community, that word hope, that it starts to diminish. Like they know when they're out there, people are saying, be hopeful, things are going to get better. But when that door closes behind you and you're either alone or you're a single parent or you're even a family, some of the work that I've done with Men's Haven, for example, in the last 5 years, where it's working with men, of all ages, but often they are part of a core family and they just feel helpless. They feel like, and specifically I'm not relating this that women, once again, don't have the same issues, but I was more focused on men. But there is this notion with men in our community, especially middle-aged men, where the kids basically have grown up. They're now in this area between kids moving out, them reassessing their own work life, their balance, their health. They're coming across other men who unfortunately are either getting sick, losing their jobs, having relationship issues. So all these things put in a pot, they're starting to having to confront that. Yes. So, it's more about letting them know that there is a group out there or there are networks out there, organisations out there that actually can help. And it comes back to that word hope, that those organisations will give you the hope to try to bring you out of those circumstances. But there's a lot of work to do still. Yeah,
and can you talk about Men's Haven, since we're on the subject here? Sure. Just talk a little bit about the group and what does it do?
So at the moment it's on a bit of a hiatus because of COVID, but going back pre-COVID we were doing very well. So myself, Michael Kirk, and Ian Israelson, because I want to just give them a rap because it wasn't just my idea, we basically were from 3 different communities, I'd say, but we were all friends. And we sort of were chatting together and we realised when we were talking that we were all bringing up other guys that seemed to be going through some kind of hardship. Not necessarily at the extreme level, thankfully, but we thought, there must be a lot of other guys that are out there that are feeling the same way, or that just want an escape from that actually just want to go somewhere, maybe hear a speaker, something, not related to their life, but something interesting, come to something, maybe network a little bit, not necessarily business-wise, but from a friendship point of view. Because the other thing we'd seen at the older age, once people had got to, say, in their late 60s, early 70s, if they hadn't developed some kind of core community, core friendships around them, it tended to be when they retired or got sick or were basically extracted from their daily life, they didn't have any gel for them to be able to relate to interpersonal discussions and things like these issues that they were going through. they didn't have the coffee date, I call it.
Right.
And
Okay.
anyone who knows me, and my wife thinks it's hilarious, but I'm the coffee. I love a coffee with anyone. I've had one
Yes.
with you, Greg, in the past. But it's very much just that simple notion of having a coffee, how things going, Greg, what's happening in your life, and through that discussion, things will come up. Oh, things are tough at work, or things this. So the group sort of was built on that notion, and we started about 2 years before COVID, and it really grew into 60, 70 people, a session meeting once a month. And what we felt is that was a community developing, not outside of people's individual communities, but they could come once a month, and they could just be themselves in a way, almost like being separated from their core group where they didn't want to be vulnerable. And that's another word that I think is not, well, it is starting to be used a lot more, is vulnerability. And I think, Greg, the two of us as males are, the way I describe it is we're stuck in between two worlds. So the world of our parents, which were told as men, be hard, don't cry, don't show your emotion, and our kids' world, which are saying, be our friends, tell us what's happening, I can see you're not doing well today. And I think as men, and I'm generalizing, we at our age, we are fighting with that, because part of us is saying, no, I've got to be strong, I've got to be the rock for the community. And the other part is saying, well, I just read in online that I can be as vulnerable as I want, and I should be crying every night. And I'm not making light of it, but a lot of guys are finding it very hard to come to terms with that.
Guilty, yes.
So what we wanted is also a space where at times we could also have specific speakers, which we interweaved in our year of speakers. Some were more about, we had psychologists, or we had people about health, where you could start to talk about having that health check, or maybe you shouldn't feel guilty about actually going to a psychologist, because there was a lot of guilt as well with guys about, well, whether it was financial or I shouldn't be taking away from the family to go and do my own therapy. It's like that money needs to go to my wife and my kids, etc. So opening up that conversation. And to be honest, the best sessions we had were those where the vulnerability started to be broken down, and the questions started at the end, and you actually, by the end of it, had, I really need to at least go and see someone or speak to somebody. But intertwined with that, we had also speakers on business, travel, etc. So the whole Men's Haven idea grew, and it grew quite well. And then unfortunately, COVID kind of stopped that, because it was very much about physically meeting. Because we went onto Zoom, it didn't work as well. But to be honest, what we're working on now, coming out of winter, is we're going to convert that Men's Haven into a walking group. So one of the things about getting out and being physical, and also I might give my wife's business a bit of a plug. She's a health coach, and her notion is step by step. So you actually walk and talk. So taking that notion, and we know with our kids, when we want to talk to our kids about something, if you sit them across the table, their eyes are everywhere.
Doesn't work.
If we're going for a walk around the block, it's like they don't have to look at you. So the same notion, we're going to start walking around Caulfield Park. Every corner you get to, you change your partner in terms of your work to, and it might be, Greg, I didn't know you did that, etc. So we're going to morph into that. We're just waiting for the Melbourne summer weather to start, but that's where I think Men's Haven is going to morph to.
I think that's an incredible idea, and sometimes it's absolutely fascinating, A, to talk to people that you have no idea what they do, and sometimes, and B, I suppose in some ways it's easier to talk to a stranger, if you will, than your best mate about something.
My notion also is everyone has a story, and every person is a library. So there's a lot of books in there that don't get accessed, and that's true of life. Like, unfortunately, why does it take at the end of someone's life that we start hearing about all the things that they've done? Why shouldn't we be hearing those stories much earlier on and passing them down? That's one part of it. The second part of it is that everyone has a story. My kids, I think public speaking is not for everyone, especially our kids' generation, because the social online and social media, etc., has kind of extracted in a way that ability to talk and to public speak. So they actually some are very good at it, but a lot of them are very fearful. And what I say is just tell your story. If you tell your story, everyone will be interested because it's yours. You're not telling someone else's story. So once again, I think it's very much about being able to extract those stories, and we can learn from everybody.
Absolutely. I want to take a little bit of a turn here right now. COVID, obviously we know that we're feeling the effects of it now, but you feel, you've written about it, I believe, in the Times of Israel even, that we have another pandemic going on right now. Can you just talk about that a little bit?
So once again, I'm not a health professional, so
Yes.
when I use the word pandemic, I use it lightly. And in the article that I wrote, it was based on a number of notions about being a man, I suppose, in today's society, in the Jewish society, etc. And I won't go through each of the areas, but as a summary, as a synopsis, what I was saying is it's about the dialogue. So people are going through different things, and once again, it's equally, if not more, sometimes for women also going through those things. I think things like domestic violence, etc., are much more prevalent with women, and that's another whole area that men need to understand more and be more empathetic and sympathetic to, especially I think from our age. But going back to the actual pandemic, I think what it did is anyone who was on a road to recovery pre-COVID, it kind of put a roadblock in front of them, because say they started getting more fit, or they started talking about more things, they were going to their psychologist, those kind of things stopped. Obviously Zoom and things like that made it a little bit easier, but it closed the community.
Yeah.
What I think it also did is people had to confront their fears. So if they were having issues with relationship, they were now stuck together with that person for an extended period of time.
23 hours a day.
And the reality is that our life in the Western world, it's much more different, I think, in sort of second and third world economies, where they live much more closely as in one dwelling as a family.
Yeah.
We're lucky in the Western world, we've got a lot of room in our in a lot of our houses. We can go to work, we can go to sport, we can go to the parks. When that was taken away from us, I think it put a lot of pressure on relationships. I know for one, with Sally and myself, we've never spent that much time together in terms of, and it was a majority of people. So you started to have conversations, but you're also little things that might have annoyed you, which you could just leave at the door when you walked out. You had to deal with them in a way. So that was one thing. The second thing is that depression, I think, or that being down was more prevalent because you couldn't hide it from anyone, from your kids, from your family, etc. So what I wanted to do with writing that article was more create conversation about it. And I think all of this that is happening, this discussion, you've got a lot of podcasts out there. The imperfects, if you look at that whole, there's a podcast called The Imperfects, if no one's ever seen it, but it's fantastic, talking about vulnerability and talking very much about high-profile people who go through depression. I think sometimes we see people's lives on a pedestal.
Yes.
So we think that person over the road, what a great life they have. Like they don't look like they have any problems at all.
Right.
And I think that also sometimes translates to us, Greg, where we try to, with our kids sometimes, and as men, we try to portray this, we want them to think that there's this perfect umbrella across us.
Yes.
So that's great, but I think we also have to prepare them and our friends that maybe are going through hard times, that things don't always go to plan. And often that not going to plan is not have anything to do with us. It's got something externally, but it's a point that we need to address and work out how we navigate through that.
Yeah, and what we are now, and I'm hearing it more and more, is these ramifications that we thought that, okay, COVID's over, everything back to normal. It's far from that, isn't it?
I think that I would say things have sprung back in a lot of ways. Obviously, going back to work, being able to socialise more. But I think what's happened if we go back to the initial part of our discussion, is those people that were quite vulnerable at the beginning and had really tough emotional issues that they were dealing with, they've kind of, in a way, people expect them to be cured. It's like, oh, well, COVID's over, you're back, and we're back to our normal life. But what they don't remember is that normal life before COVID was not that great. People were struggling. And I think now I think that there's kind of been like a ripple effect where those things have been amplified that were challenging for people. Yeah. So, for example, one thing, since COVID opened up, obviously people have travelled again, etc. And I'm all for people who have the means to be able to travel. But one of the things that annoy me a little bit is when people travel, and it's fine to post like 1 or 2 photos, hey, I'm just here. But when people post literally every part of their trip, and the reality is most people here aren't traveling or can't afford to travel. And people have to realize, and I'm giving you just one example of things that can trigger. So once again, I'm not a professional.
No, but point noted.
But the reality is when people are seeing, and once again, we know about social media and we tell our kids it's one point in time and people look happy. But the reality is when people see a whole family traveling around the world, and once again, I don't take away from them doing that, but when they're posting it continuously, they just have to bear in mind that there are people out there who are sitting at home in bad relationships, financially sick, etc., who can't, and I'm sure are very happy for them. But we're just, in everything that we do, we've got to be mindful about what people are going through, and whether that's a conversation you're having with someone, whether that's something you're telling somebody, or whether that's something online at all ages that we're actually posting. It can have an enormous effect on people's mental state.
Yeah, I never thought about it quite in those words, but yes, it is very much in your face today. And whenever you are doing something, think about the effect that it is having on people.
I mean, it can even be, a simcha, and once again, simchas are great, and we should be advertising them. But some people get home and they've, it could be that they've got older kids that can't get married, or they've got a sick child who can't get out, or they've got a child who's going through also some kind of depression themselves, or is addicted to something. So once again, I'm by no means a saint myself, and I'm not saying people shouldn't do those things, but it's about being wary, just being conscious and mindful about what we do, because I think, when we're out there, we're in a way advertising our lives when we talk about it.
Sure.
So it's just about how do we present our lives. And I suppose bringing it circle to your initial question is, I would like to think that people are talking about me in some of the things that I'm doing outside the community, rather than where I've been or what work I'm doing, because I think at the end of our days, the worth is going to be what we've given back to the community rather than what we've accumulated.
Right. Yeah. Absolutely. Dan, we have to keep it short, but it's incredibly inspirational to talk to you and really refreshing. If there was anything that you want people to really understand, what would that 1 or 2 points be?
So I think from a more holistic point of view is be involved in something, like get out there, join a group. It doesn't have to be a Jewish community organisation, it can be any other organisation. Everyone has a skill that they can help an organisation with, and whether that's driving someone to a medical appointment or whether that's giving legal advice. I'm not saying those things are not, they're both equally important, but I'm saying both those things are really important. And the last thing that I would end off is allow yourself to be vulnerable, and that vulnerability should be to be able to ask for help. And help is not a negative word. Help is actually something which will get you on the road to a happier and healthier life.
Right. Thanks, Daniel.
Thank you.